Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this second session this afternoon. I hope you've had an enjoyable time around the festival space. I know there's been lots of very interesting, inspiring parallel sessions going on, as well as quite a lot of fun stuff. Apparently a very senior British government official had a 3D print out of himself. Welcome back. Just a few house notes before we start. Once again, just be aware of the fire exits in the unlikely event that we'll need to be evacuated. There's one at the back there and two on the sides. There'll be a fire alarm, and then there'll be a public announcement on the loudspeaker system. Make your ways there, and in the column just directly opposite the main entrance to the centre. And once again, very important to bear in mind that there are simultaneous translations, if needs be, on the consoles on each of your chairs. Channel 1 is English, Channel 2 Spanish, 3 is in French, 4 is in Arabic, and last but not by any means least, Channel 5 is in Russian. And do keep tweeting. The hashtag is OGP13, but I know that a lot of you have got your mobile phones and various sort of devices. If you could just put the ring tone on silent, but of course do keep using it to tell everyone about the different sessions and the very exciting speakers that we have coming up in the next few minutes. First of all, though, we're going to start off with the third of our OGP Bright Spots speakers. Urmo Kubar is Executive Director of the Network of Estonian Non-Profit Organizations, NENO. Give him a round of applause.
Ask a person to think of an image about civil society. And most likely, it will be something like this. Or that. Protest. Almost a symbol of activism, isn't it? But is there something else, perhaps more constructive, people can do besides telling their governments that they are not happy and, well, waiting for the next elections? That was the question that was asked in Estonia last year. Now, for those of you who have never heard about our country, this is it. Basically, go to Finland and turn right. Estonians, just 1.3 million people altogether, are known to gather in big numbers for singing, rather for protesting. Even our independence movement 25 years ago in my childhood was hence named Singing Revolution. But things were to change in 2012. Now, the singing did not become less popular, but people who had, unlike in many other countries, quite patiently accepted public budget cuts during economic crisis. People became really upset when a whistleblower, former MP and a member of Prime Minister's party, announced that euros of unknown origin by party leaders that he then had to donate to the party as if it was his own money. Now, 8,000 may not sound awfully lot, but he claimed that also other members have donated funds to the party this way, including other MPs. Although the party rejected accusations, and the subsequent criminal investigation was later ended due to lack of hard evidence, the public did not find party's denials convincing. That led to street protests and petitions signed by thousands of people demanding more transparency in party financing, as well as more dialogue and openness of political system in general. But how to do it? What do these buzzwords even mean? Transparency, openness, dialogue. Instead of leaving that to politicians, a group of Estonian civil society organizations started People's Assembly, a crowdsourcing initiative open to everyone. Imagine if people can collaboratively put together Wikipedia, which is as accurate as the most recognized encyclopedias, but richer in its content, more inclusive and faster in updates. Can't we use the same collective wisdom for policy making if people are provided with right tools? We started with opening a simple website where people could post and comment ideas on 5 topics, such as party regulation, public participation, elections, etc. Within 3 weeks, the site gained 60,000 unique visits and 6,000 ideas. And remember, it's a tiny country. Now, all these were systemized into subcategories and commented by dozens of experts, both scholars and practitioners. A week of seminars followed, where the authors of proposals and experts discussed those ideas and jointly selected 18 questions that were seen as most important. And early on April, we invited more than 300 people, a random representative sample of whole population, for a deliberation day. It was like a public opinion survey, but with an important twist. Instead of just telling us their raw information about those issues, discussed the pros and cons in small groups, and at the end of the day, they casted their individual informed preferences on all these 18 issues. And a few days later, the results were given to our parliament by the President of the Republic. And at the moment, Parliament is working with first 2 law amendments based on our input, and has set a timetable also for the rest. Now, summed up in those few sentences, this may sound easy, but as practitioners of open government, we surely know that it never is. It's not just the workload, which was, of course, huge, but I'd say that the biggest obstacle was the skepticism. Countless times, we were told that we must be out of our minds could come up with something meaningful. Yes, consult experts, fine. Consult NGOs, well, if you really have to. But ordinary people, they are ignorant, they are selfish, they are easily manipulated. These topics are too complicated for them, we were told. We were even accused of harming the very good, that skeptics were wrong. Our participants were students and pensioners, farmers and nurses, artists and entrepreneurs, you name it. Most of them did not have a degree in law or social sciences. Well, many of them did not have any university degree. It was a microcosm of society, after all. But when asked with respect, people put in their very best effort and their passion for the country. Discuss those issues outside their close circle of like-minded friends and families, to meet other people, ordinary people other than government, who see things differently, and to understand that disagreement is not a bad thing, but actually an opportunity to learn something new. At the end, 87% of our participants said that they know now more about those issues. And 70% said that based on this new knowledge, they changed at least some of their earlier views. And just imagine what a difference it could make in voting results if citizens would have the same opportunity before elections. And on that note, 82% of our participants said that now they are more interested in politics and participation also in the future. And that's what I would call the most important achievement, even more important than the concrete input to the lawmaking. You know, Winston Churchill, a man whose name is given to this auditorium, Winston Churchill said that the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with an average voter. I think the problem is that far too often we are not ready to dedicate more than 5 minutes to an average voter. After People's Assembly, there is no excuse for anyone to say that people are neither interested nor capable for meaningfully and constructively participate in policy making. Take your time, add respect, and an average voter may even surprise a conservative like Churchill. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you very much, Urmo. I'd now like to introduce our fourth Bright Spot speaker, Cristian Botan. Cristian works as an advisor within the Chancellery of the Prime Minister of Romania's on issues regarding transparency in public administration. Thank you. There's the thing to change with it.
Thank you. It would have been rather unfair to be able to speak to this great audience today in London at the Open Government Summit this year and not remember that particular scene from Yes Minister. Before I actually start my presentation, I'd like to address a couple of congratulations. First of all, to the host of this event, to the United Kingdom, not only for being here today together with all of you, but for their extended leadership on open government over the past several years. To all of you, obviously, here from all around the world, it's impressive, and I'm honored to be here with you today. And last but not least, my fellow bright spots. I saw all their presentations earlier today, and I'm not really sure if I'd rather like them to win than me. Now, myself, these are a couple of famous figures born in Romania. You will recall, I think, Count Dracula. Secondly, there's Nadia Comaneci, which is the first gymnast in history. Then there's Elie Wiesel, which is a survivor of the Holocaust and the Nobel Peace Prize winner. Ilie Năstase, world #1 in tennis during the 1970s. Nicolae Ceausescu, which you might also have heard of, a famous communist controversial figure, and Gheorghe Hagi, the best football player we have. So, enough about Romania. This was from a hackathon we did. I'm in my third year as a PhD candidate in Bucharest right now. My thesis is about integrity in public administration. Along the past years, I have interned in several public institutions, home and abroad. I attended a number of summer schools on anti-corruption. And beginning last year in December, I've started working for the government. How did I get there, though? Well, I don't have a background in IT particularly. All my studies surround government and public administration. Small website I made. It's just a WordPress. The ones of you that are IT literate will know that's not very complicated. What this website did was put together in one single place all the civil service jobs available throughout the country, from ministries and departments in Bucharest to city halls. This meant having access to information in one single place. You didn't have to go to the headquarters of a specific institution to ask about it. You didn't have to get a phone call or an email. You don't even want to try emailing public institutions in Romania. And this apparently was joining in. A lot of emails were coming back to us saying that it's finally great to get a chance to know what's particularly useful, because in Romania, as in probably some countries present here today, we have an issue of nepotism and favoritism when it comes to taking up public jobs. People won't really even know about the jobs until after they're occupied by somebody. Or they will post up a public announcement, but it's just to keep on with the formalities. The decision has already been taken. So that was the idea behind the website. Let's allow people to know the information and give them a fair chance about it. Afterwards, the media got onto the website. For those of you who don't actually speak Romanian, this headline says a 25-year-old managed with 500 euros to do something that the state hasn't been able to do for the past 20 years. A website reuniting all the public sector jobs. Now, thank you. Thank you. Now, this was great because it went viral online. Not because of the story itself, but it is a great title, you have to admit. 1 month passed after this news article, and while I was doing pretty good with the website on matters of how many people were joining in, it still wasn't enough because the system needed to be changed, not just creating a website about it. So what I did was write the Prime Minister of my country. I'm not politically affiliated, I just have some knowledge in administration. But I did decide to write an open letter to the Prime Minister, just asking, considering he mentioned the word transparency about 23 times in the government program, that we should actually do something about it. Here's where it got a bit complicated, because when I wrote the letter, I wasn't really sure what kind of feedback that might get. Are they going to say, okay, so how do we get rid of this guy? Because obviously he might be a bit of a pain at some point. Or the more positive scenario that we actually meet. So this is where the story becomes a bit interesting. Radu, which is here with me today, was the person from the office of the Prime Minister that invited me for a discussion. And I started talking to Radu about projects. He had just joined the PM's office as well. And I was very enthusiastic about meeting somebody that was from outside the system, but actually knew the problems and knew we needed to improve things. So a couple of weeks later, I think, I got into this photo. The guy standing next to me is the Prime Minister of Romania in his office. That photo was taken. The picture depicts me explaining what isn't working on civil service recruitment, and his expression is, well, natural. But no, he's a great guy after all. Okay. He is my boss, so. Okay. So, getting back to the website, these are the statistics from 2012. We just posted about 3,500 jobs, which is all there was in 2012. But the thing is, we got about 1.7 million page views for that many jobs, which in my belief was great because people were actually getting the info and then starting using it. After my website and after I joined the PM's team in Romania, we improved it a bit, as in not just keeping it static, but added a few features as well. This is one of them. This is a real-time geolocalization of the civil service jobs available in Romania. People can just click on whatever button or zoom in and see what job there is, the conditions you need to apply for, etc. Now, this is obviously all on the online. You can't really see real change just through a website. So what I did afterwards was just call up institutions and say, you remember that job offer you had and the deadline expired so you can apply? How many candidates did you get for that? Because that's how you quantify, obviously, a website. So point E is where the job website actually started. Before then, institutions like the Competition Council or Proiect City Halls or Bucharest City Hall had about 1, 2, 5 candidates per job. It went up to 50. which is cute and funny because they had so many candidates that they didn't have room to examine them all in the same time. And that's created a bit of a logistical issue. The things I'd like to leave with you today are the following. We, after this tremendous event, will return to our countries. And in continuous to our efforts, I think not only should we act on a national level, but maintain a network about it. I think that's the whole idea of the OGP, actually. Just promote good ideas and take things forward. I started with a clip from Yes Minister. I'd like to end with a quote from Yes Minister as well. At some point, a government official was saying, if people don't know what the government is doing, then they don't really know what the government is doing wrong. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian. It's frightening just how relevant and universal Yes Minister is 30 years on after it came to an end, sadly. Thank you very much to Christian and to Urmo as well for his earlier presentation. Thank you. I'd now like to welcome a very special panel onto the stage, including what I hope will be a live link across the Atlantic in a few minutes. First, the founder and head of Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangatan and a prominent leader in the right to information movement in her native India, Aruna Roy. The founder of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation and a senior advisor on the independent reporting mechanism of the OGP, Mr. Mo Ibrahim. And we're delighted to have as well the Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs, the Right Honourable William Hague. And as I say, hopefully we'll be joined in a few minutes with a live link to Washington. I'd like to start off asking you first, Foreign Secretary. I mean, Britain has been very vocal. We're hearing from the Prime Minister this morning in the first plenary session, not just on terms of the commitments to the open government issue, but also particularly on the question of transparency across the board, but transparency in particular as well on extractive industries. Why has Britain decided to get so firmly behind OGP, and why the emphasis on transparency?
Well, let's highlight two main reasons. Many of you heard from the Prime Minister earlier. It's really part of our foreign policy and our economic policy. And we believe, and I and my colleagues believe, these things should be connected. This may have been a novel idea to some governments here in the past, but foreign policy and economic policy should support each other. And our economic policy very much requires transparency. After all, when you think, where is the growth going to come from in the world? Is it going to come from government spending? Well, not in European economies, including Britain anymore. Is it going to come from consumer confidence? Well, consumers aren't very confident after the recent recession and financial crisis. It's going to come from trade and investment in the world. And trade and investment is supported by transparency. When you think that it's estimated 5% of global GDP is lost to corruption, nobody really knows, of course, but it's estimated that. And when you think that the loss of income to developing countries from illicit financial flows and tax evasion and moves of that kind is meant to be something like $1 trillion a year. You know, that's the same as the GDP of Belgium, Switzerland, and South Africa all put together. These are enormous sums. Well, then you realize that having greater transparency is a big part of encouraging trade and investment. So in our G8 presidency, that the Prime Minister has particularly pushed this in extractive industries and in land transactions. We've helped to create agreements with key developing countries in these areas. But it's also part of foreign policy. It's economic policy, it's foreign policy as well. If you look at most of the dramatic political change happening in the world, it's driven to some degree by a demand for accountability, which is what these two excellent speakers were just talking about. The causes of the Arab Spring are very complex, but they include a large measure of demand for accountability. And so if we're going to be moving with the grain of world affairs in foreign policy, we should be on the side of accountability in well-established democracies as well as new democracies. So when you add these things together, we think in the British government, this is why we say transparency is an idea whose time has come, and we're trying to fulfill that in our domestic policies as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to say that we are now joined by the Honourable John F. Kerry, the US Secretary of State, in a live link to Washington. It's good to have you, Secretary of State. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm glad to be with you.
Thank you very much. We were just beginning with William Hague talking about the commitment to OGP on behalf of the British government. Could you tell us in terms of your own reflections on why OGP is so important an initiative?
Sure, I'd be happy to, but let me just begin by saying hello to William, and what a pleasure it is to be with him and with all of you. And I want him to know that he persuaded me. I was sitting here listening to him, and it sounded great. Do you want me just to share some thoughts with you?
Yeah, why not?
There you go, William. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, well, first of all, let me just start by saying that there are about 20 reasons why I wish I could be there with you in London right now, and those are all of my meetings here today. But obviously I'm not. I'm glad we're represented there at the meeting, but I just want to start by thanking Foreign Secretary Hague for the British government's tremendous leadership on this front. I mean, really between the G8 and in the US process on the post-2015 development agenda, as well as in the open government partnership, our friends in Great Britain have really been extraordinary leaders on this. And so from the President on down, including Ambassador Power at the UN and National Security Advisor Susan Rice, myself, we are deeply committed to the mission of the OGP. And for us, I think, much as William was describing to everybody a moment ago, you know, the reasons for our support ought to be, and embrace of everything that this stands for, ought to be self-evident. It's very hard to overstate the impact that civil society has had on our structure of government and who we are and what we do. The fact is that in the United States, in Great Britain, and in countries like ours, people have the freedom to assemble, the freedom to speak out, the freedom to organize, to call for government change. And in our countries, both of our countries, media holds extraordinary power and extraordinary freedom and ability to be able to shape thinking, and people, individual people, through their own individual organizing efforts or through the non-governmental organizations that they choose to become part of, all have this freedom to be able to shape the media, to have an impact through the media. So, you know, here in our country, I will tell you that it's something I grew up with, starting in my early years in college. And even before President Kennedy was elected in 1960, his first political event I took part in, I've watched these forces shape our lives. We had the civil rights movement in the 1960s when we were all students. We had the women's rights movement that struck out for women's equality and has really transformed our nation. We have the labor movement. Almost every single movement towards progress, the peace movement, all of these have had a profound impact, and they've all been grassroots, homegrown, because we have this ability to throw our ideas on the table. And I think, you know, I spent a couple of years when I came back from being involved in the war in Vietnam, I spent a couple of years organizing and working to end the war. And one of the lessons that came out to me through that was, therefore, how important it is for government to be accountable. That was a period of time when government, regrettably, lied to the people it represented. And those lies saw us involved in a war that was wrongful and inappropriate. So I also took part in the first ever Earth Day here in the United States, and I was an organizer in Massachusetts at the grassroots level. And we have 20 million people come out of their homes free to make their feelings heard. And they had a profound impact on our country, because after the 1970 movement that brought those 20 million people out, they didn't stop there. They translated that into political activity that targeted the worst votes in Congress and organized to defeat them. And they did defeat 7 of the 12 so-called dirty dozen worst votes on the environment. And that ignited a legislative response that produced the Clean Air Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Coastal Zone Management Act, and actually created the Environmental Protection Agency that we have in the United States today, that is busy trying to deal with climate change and other pressing issues. So the bottom line is very simple. Those of us who came out of that period, Vice President Biden, myself, and others, believe very strongly that this kind of effort, the civil society effort, is what creates a farm system for future leadership. And you can see it with Lech Walesa, you can see it with Václav Havel, you can see it even with Barack Obama, President of the United States, who was himself a community organizer, at the beginning of his public engagement. So, look, we think that it's a remarkable achievement that in the 2 years since the OGP was founded, the initial list of 8 participating countries has now grown to include more than 60 countries. And from Brazil to Turkey to Liberia, more and more countries are passing laws that are guaranteeing citizens the right to information. And at the State Department, we are using our ongoing strategic dialogue with civil society to bring new ideas to the table. And we have a new office of faith-based community initiatives. And that's a direct result of an idea that came out of that dialogue. And so, our hope is that through this work of the OGP, we can all maximize this notion that we live in this globalized, interconnected world. And President Obama issued a challenge at the UN recently to commit to spending the next 12 months working together to make concrete progress in these areas. So I don't want to go on and on. I know you want to have a little more of a dialogue here. Yep. But I just want to emphasize how committed we are to this. We all, as President Obama said, as other countries back down, we have a responsibility to step up. We need to do it together. And I think that's what's important.
Thank you very much indeed, Secretary of State, for your time. I know you're very busy, but we enjoyed having your input here and raised some very important points. I'd like to go to Aruna Roy next, because as John Kerry was mentioning there, the importance of civil society groups working at a grassroots level is incredibly important. That's what you do in rural India. There is the perception somehow that in places like rural India, the whole idea of open government is not important. Is that the case?
Well, we've had a lot of humor to begin with this evening. So I'd like to say that when we went to a civil service institution, some colleagues of mine and I, and we were presented as civil society members, many of them were deeply upset. And they said, "Do you think we are uncivil?" So I think civil society itself has to be unpacked. And the people who live in rural India are intelligent people. Like Urmo said, ordinary people are intelligent, they are bright. We don't listen to them. And we have Gandhi. Gandhi traveled the whole of India, listened to people. And that's how the national movement for independence really originated. And civil disobedience, or listening to human beings whom we dismiss as ordinary, is part of the Indian culture. So rural India, which really suffers the worst of Indian democracy, is where democracy is most alive. That's where they want to set it right. They do protest, they do struggle, and those photographs we saw on the screen are of course typical photographs, but it doesn't end there. They protest to create something, to make something, they don't want violence, they don't want to beat up somebody, But they do want their bread, they do want their health services. So it was through this kind of protest of the right to information. We do think that their voices were really very strong. And they created the kind of discomfort that's necessary, that we talked about this morning. There was a lot of discomfort. There were many people who thought it was terrible. But the dialogue began, which has ended here in a sense. So the dialogue began between people, the civil servants, and the politicians. And it's in that dialogue, through the course of that dialogue and the dialectic, that there was protest in a transparent, working environment grew.
Just very quickly, OGP is about supporting or creating the space for civil society groups to function, because it is, you know, under threat. You look all around the world, whether it's freedom of expression, freedom of the media. How important is that? You go first, William, and then if you'd like to comment afterwards, Secretary of State.
Well, it is. It's hugely important, and I think that means it matters a great deal what example we set in our own countries. After all, we cannot change everything that happens in other countries in the world, but we can set a good example ourselves. We've learned to do that in an action plan. I think a fantastic job in pursuing this whole agenda nationally and internationally. But the first time we did an open government action plan, they told us we hadn't included civil society enough. And so the second time we did it, they are very much part of the plan and part of the input into it. So it's very, very important in a country like ours, an extraordinarily free and open country. And I think if we set that example, and we do so in other European countries and in America, well, then it leaves fewer excuses for other people in the world where it can be even more important.
Secretary of State?
Well, I agree, but I mean, the simple reality is that in a democracy, and particularly with the vibrancy of the social media today, you really have to be open. I mean, it seems to me we're in Tahrir Square, the pace at which information moves and events unfold is different from ever before. I heard a story the other day. I was in Asia, the Asian Summit, and one of the stories going around there was about how in one country, I'll leave it unnamed, but in one country an official was caught in the social media with a sort of white spot where his tan line was on his watch. And so there was no watch, but somebody realized he'd been wearing one. So they went back and found some pictures, and they found him with a different watch almost every day of the week, much more expensive than he could afford on his government salary. And boom, they found as a result corruption, and he lost his job, among other things. But so there's a new policeman on the block, very different from the past. And that is this broad accountability for the people. But, before that even existed, one of the fundamentals of our notions of how you govern is you got to listen to people. And the White House has recently developed a new means of trying to tap into this, which is an online petition platform called We the People. And just in the last 2 years, more than 10 million users have generated more than 260,000 petitions on topics ranging from gun violence to, how you unlock a cell phone. It's pretty amazing. And one of the virtues of this, I think William will agree with me, is those of us in government, in positions like I have, we come and we go. I'm here if I don't screw up for another few years. But there are a lot of groups out there that have a lifetime expertise built up advocating for the environment or for children or for one thing or another. And we need that input because they will have much better information in many cases and a more grassroots, people-based view than somebody who may come in and out of government, and the whole purpose is really to listen to people and build on that experience. So it's invaluable, absolutely invaluable.
We like your honesty, Secretary of State. I wish I could tease out the name of the country of the story you were saying earlier.
Well, I think if you Google it, you'll find it.
I'd like to come to Mo Ibrahim, if I may. And Mo, you and the Mo Ibrahim Foundation have been very involved in leadership in Africa, well known for your work and the work of the foundation on that. I want to talk about two things: business and the importance of business and business leadership in this whole issue of OGP, and particularly in terms of transparency. And what does the Open Government Partnership need to do in order to continue raising the bar in terms of commitments and or sustaining its progress?
Right, just two tough questions.
Two big questions, yes. I know.
Right, and I'm really amazed by the absence of the business people from our business have a stake in open government. It's important for the business. And business also coming under extreme pressure from civil society now to really to clean up their act. And we have seen so many really sad incidents. Every day I open the newspaper, the bank has been fined $1 billion, you know, somebody be there. So it's time for business to show us really that they are good citizens. And that is something important to business to be here. There's no business people really joining our. They are part of civil society, and open government is important for the business, and we really need to invite the business people. It's not like they should be invited. You should, you know, knock at the door. Actually, that is as far as business. As far as commitments, it's too early yet. We only had 2 years now. We managed to produce the first reports on the first 8 countries. I'm concerned about a number of things. First, for the credibility of this body, we need to produce really credible reports, country reports. And to produce country reports, we'll have to hire research teams in each country to produce really the reporting on each country commitment. That's if we are serious about this. That costs money.
That's the independent reporting mechanism.
That's the independent reporting of the partnership. That needs money, needs funding, and I'm very concerned about the state of the funding. The last time I looked at our account was a few days ago. I found something very strange. Actually, 4 foundations funded over $4 million. 60 governments funded $1.6 million. And I turned to Secretary of State there. I'm not going to include you there because Britain done very well. You've done half of this 1.6. You are okay. Okay. Only $200,000. This compared with, I mean, $800,000, $600,000 from UK. I mean, UK hasn't got 3 times the GDP of the United States. I mean, we know there is some.
When they started.
We know there have been issues with the Congress and the budget, but I think you got some budget now, and you saved the ticket. You didn't come here today to the meeting, so you saved the ticket, you know. So you really need. Because seriousness.
I don't think that's quite going to meet the demand by ticket. Let me announce something, if you will, because we're very engaged in many, many parts of the world. I'm very proud. You know, we may not give to every single entity that asks, but we're giving literally hundreds of millions of dollars in these kinds of efforts. And I'm proud to say that no country in the world is putting as much money into developmental issues as we are every single year. So I don't feel defensive about it, but I am happy to tell you today that the United States, we're announcing right here at this moment that we're putting $2.5 million into a pilot anti-corruption project in West Africa. And it's designed to facilitate collaboration between governments and others. So I think we are prepared to put money up, and I'll have to check into why the ODP isn't getting more. I'll find out.
Yeah, and actually, really in fairness, I singled out United States because I had the secretary here, and I love him. I'm a fan of him. But really, the truth has, we have to be frank. Friends have to be frank with each other. But many governments really did not cough up. And this is not a free ride. And it's unfair for civil society to bear the brunt of this and governments to have a free ride. So commitment means commitment. And we need really to do that in order for us to produce really credible reports and to really go forward. So that's a big challenge for us, actually.
Okay, thank you very much. I wish we could go on and on, actually, but I know that William's got a very tight deadline. Secretary of State, thank you very much indeed for joining us and giving us your time. Much appreciated. So
I just want to ask him a question.
Wait 1 second. We've got one more question from Aruna. Secretary of State.
I just have a question which I want to ask both of you. The world has become a much better place. There's more transparency in governments. There's more accountability. But at the same time, there are more restrictive laws being passed by all governments today than ever before. And there is an attempt at surveillance by my government and your governments. Why is this happening? I want to know, because if we are going to become an open society, we should always trust each other, and we don't have to spy or suspect, believe that the other one's bad. I trust you. I believe that there is a social contract between the two of you and all of us that we will work in the interests of each other. It's such a delicate balance that when it gets disrupted, that it takes a lot of time to set it right. I'm not being critical negatively, but I really want the world to be a better place. And we've been building this trust. We talk of trust deficits. We've been building it with so much care. Me with my government, all my friends here with their governments. We want it to prosper.
John, that's one for you.
That wasn't me, that was William.
That's a good one.
I don't know, William, does that mean that you guys have never, or do never, no, I'm not going to. There is no question that the President and I and others in government have actually learned of some things that have been happening in many ways on an automatic pilot, because the technology is there and the ability has been there over the course of a long period of time, really going back to World War II and to the very difficult years of the Soviet Union and the Cold War, and then, of course, 9/11, the attack on the United States, and the rise of radical extremism in the world that is hell-bent, determined to try to kill people and blow people up and attack governments. Not just us, but Tokyo subway, London train station, Madrid, I mean, many, many parts of the world have been subject to these terrorist attacks. And in response to them, the United States and others came together, others, I emphasize to you, and realized that we're dealing in a new world where people are willing to blow themselves up. I mean, walk into a building where trucks are willing to be filled with fertilizer and planted outside a building and blow it up no matter who's in it. And there are countless examples of this. Look at Nairobi the other day, where Al-Shabaab goes into the Westgate Mall and kills, dozens, almost 100, more than 100 people innocently killed doing their shopping. So what if you were able to intercept that? We have actually prevented airplanes from going down, buildings from being blown up, and people from being assassinated, because we've been able to learn ahead of time of the plans. I assure you, innocent people are not being abused in this process, but there's an effort to try to gather information, and yes, in some cases are inappropriately, and the President, our President, is determined to try to clarify and make clear for people, and is now doing a thorough review in order that nobody will have a sense of abuse. But I want to assure you that the basic, just the other day there was news in the papers of 70 million people being listened to. No, they weren't. It didn't happen. There's an enormous amount of exaggeration and misreporting in some of what is out there. You know, what we're trying to do is in a random way find ways of trying to learn if, in fact, there is a threat that we need to respond to. And in some cases, I acknowledge to you, as has the President, some of these actions have reached too far, and we are going to make sure that that does not happen in the future.
Thank you.
Secretary, thank you very much indeed for your time. Appreciate it very much. Thank you also to Foreign Secretary William Hague and to Aruna Roy and to Mo Ibrahim. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Aruna. We could have gone on for a much longer time. I wish we could have done.
Keep in touch, yeah?
I will do, definitely. Yeah, I will. I thought it was very clever of the Foreign Secretary to ping that back to John Kerry, just as Prime Minister Cameron was going to steal a little quote earlier today by a gentleman talking about transparency being the virus, the antidote rather, to the virus of corruption. I might use that deft way of slinging as you use. I'd like to introduce the next panel to the stage, our multilateral section. Please welcome Mr. Sanjay Pradham, who's the Vice President for Change, Knowledge and Learning from the World Bank Institute. To Helen Clark, Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme. Very, very glad to have you here. To Angel Correa, the Secretary General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And to Mr. Hans Schulz, who's the Vice President of the Inter-American Development Bank. I'd also like to welcome Tara Hidayat from the President's Delivery Unit in
A very great evening to all distinguished reformers, excellencies, and ladies and gentlemen. It really gives me a very important partnership, which is the OGP Multilateral Partnership Discussion Panel. With the rapid expansion of our country participation from 8 to 61 in just 2 years, it really requires us to strengthen and extend our reach for partnerships such that we have a successful planning and delivery of country commitments. And multilateral institutions are making significant investments at the country level. Early this year, the OGP Steering Committee began a process to establish a formal partnerships with several multilaterals that were interested in coordinating efforts even more closely. On the occasion of this summit, I am very pleased to announce the launch of formal partnership with the 4 institutions, the World Bank, UNDP, Inter-American Development Bank, and the OECD. Each of these partnerships will take a slightly different shape, but they have one key thing in common. Each will leverage the expertise, the resources, and convening energy and strength of established multilateral institutions with years of experience promoting good governance. This is an excellent opportunity to mobilize additional technical assistance and financial support for countries that are already part of open government partnerships and those that are even interested to join the Open Government Partnership. Just to give you a sample of the type of support that these partners are providing. In partnering with OGP to promote peer learning through hosting monthly webinars and supporting civil society outreach in Africa. In addition, targeted World Bank support in countries like Ghana and Liberia has helped strengthen the consultation process on the OGP action plan. The IDB has provided technical support to OGP countries in Latin America and the Caribbean region, including Colombia and Peru. And in early 2014, the IDB will launch a regional funding facility to respond to all its 26 borrowing country members' requests for support with their open government policies. The OECD has been and will continue to support countries from the MENA, Latin America, and Southeast Asia regions in two ways. First, by helping countries implement reforms to meet the OGP eligibility criteria, and second, by supporting current members to design and implement strong commitments. The UNDP has supported the implementation of OGP commitments in countries such as El Salvador and Montenegro. And in the Ukraine, it supported local actors to broaden the consultation process on the first OGP action plan. In this session, we will hear directly from them about their key motivations for partnering with OGP, what they see as some of the biggest opportunities and challenges in the years ahead. We sincerely welcome World Bank, IDB, OECD, and UNDP to be part of the big family of OGP, and together we deliver change to advance open and good governance. Thank you very much, and have a good discussion.
Thank you very much, Tara. I'm sure we will. Very important announcement about the partnerships on behalf of all the organizations you represent. I mean, if I start off with you, Sanjay, why should this be important to the World Bank?
So this is very exciting and very important. I want to first thank everyone and the hosts here. I think this is very important because open government can be the accelerator for our collective commitment to end poverty. So if you really think of it, the commitment to end extreme poverty, which is one of the goals of the World Bank Group, is a massive one. What it requires is that we need to lift 1.2 billion people for extreme poverty. Now, how are we going to do that in an environment where we are fiscally and financially constrained, and increasingly so? But if in such an environment, if budgets were open, if contracts were open, if citizens and the poor had a voice, whether teachers and textbooks are showing up in school, whether essential drugs are being delivered, then you would have stronger results. So open government is at the heart of ending extreme poverty. And that's why this is so important. Now, the Open Government Partnership is a unique platform which allows us to do three things, just very quickly. One, it's unique because it's a government-civil society partnership. And if you look at open budgets, open contracts, open government more broadly, it requires governments to disclose and civil society to monitor and be the voice of the poor. If this platform and what this represents can be mirrored and mimicked at the country level with the support that we collectively give to countries, then you'll have better outcomes. So that's one unique aspect. The second unique aspect of OGP is that enshrines and embodies national level action plans that then, and the World Bank Group can offer, along with other partners, financial assistance to help countries implement that. So we are supporting open data in Kenya, we're supporting open budgets in 40 countries, open contracts in 25 countries. The last aspect, which I think is important, is that this represents a north to south collaboration. And it therefore provides a lot of opportunities for knowledge exchange, for countries to be inspired by one another. That inspiration galvanizes action.
Helen, you've seen this from both sides, if you like to sort of say, with UND, but also in politics. I mean, what Sanjay's saying there, one of the points which is very important is that helping governments around the world and civil society groups with commitments and measuring that commitments is one thing. How do you actually help with turning commitments to results and measuring that? Is that something that...
I think one of the attractions of this partnership is that it's leading to concrete action plans. Concrete plans can be measured, they can be implemented, you can assess progress. And I think what UNDP can bring to the partnership is that we are represented in the world's developing countries with programs on the ground, and we can support implementation of the plan, enabling people to report back on progress here. We found there's a tremendous overlap between the action plan content and the content of our own portfolio on democratic governance. And we have rather more than $1 billion go through our books around the world every year on democratic and open governance. And we see that as far more than about people having a say just in elections. It's about ongoing citizen engagement with their governments and really getting that sense of ownership of where a country's going. So we're pleased to be part of the partnership.
Mr. Correa, is it difficult to take, I mean, very important bureaucracies and institutions and getting that mindset change in terms of
confidence, sometimes just a complete disappearance of trust and confidence in our institutions. The institutions we built over 100 years. There's a sense of a broken social contract here. And this partnership is critical to recover that fourth element of the trust in the institutions. It's on presidents, on prime ministers, on political parties, on ministers, on multinational corporations, on the financial systems of the world, etc. You know, and on international organizations also. So all the things we built so painfully now are being there's a lot of cynicism, there's a lot of skepticism, and the problem, if we do not succeed with the partnership and with the aims of the partnership, is the public policies will not stick if people do not believe in them, if people do not take ownership of the public policies, if people do not buy them and do not embrace them, then they will not produce the result which they are meant to produce. So here we're talking about one of the most important elements of the glue that gets society together, which is the belief, the trust, the confidence that we have lost. And for that, you have to open the systems, you have to open the governments, you have to provide the information, and also you have to explain what the information means. This is a very important issue. We can put out statistics and we can put out numbers and believe that we are discharging the duty. You really have to translate. You have to educate. You have to tell people what this really means and why this is important for them. Ask why. Is it difficult? Can you get governments to react? No, governments are very committed to this. And governments, I'm telling you, just came back from 5 countries in South America, and we work with Southeast Asia, and we work with Africa, and of course we work with all the members of the OECD itself. The problem, by the way, is for the most developed. Not have anything to do with the degree of development or the degree of wealth. This is a challenge we're all facing. So welcome the Open Government Partnership to help us deal with that issue.
There's a very important point, isn't it, in terms of the relevance of this movement for multilateral organizations now, particularly in the trust deficit that you're seeing in politics and business and across the globe. Hans?
Yes, thank you. And first of all, I'm very happy to be IDB, the first regional development bank to joining this partnership. We're not just doing it for the IDB, we're doing it for Latin America and the Caribbean, our 26 member countries. For these countries, given where they are in their state of development, this is a very authentic, legitimate and relevant agenda at this point in time. Societies in our countries are transforming. The growth that we've seen, sustained growth despite the global crisis over the last several years. All of us have seen in recent years public protests in Brazil, in Chile, people out in the streets requesting education, requesting participation in other elements of public society. So it's a very real agenda for the region. We also have seen 15 years of continuous consolidation of democracies in our region. So there's governments that are really committed to making this process work. And the fact that you have already plus 14, I think 14 or 15 countries that are here, we almost have 100 government representatives present here from our different countries, shows you how real this is for our constituencies. So the IDB, obviously as the prime multilateral serving this region, is interested in leveraging the partnerships globally, but also in working with all parts of society, not just with governments. We work with the private sector, we work with governments, and we work with civil society as well, to strengthen each of them so they can better articulate what they do in this context.
We've seen the OGP expand hugely. I mean, from 8 initial founding countries now to 61. How do you continue and consolidate that process? How do we get more countries? I mean, Angel, you know, there's a large number of OECD countries who are members, some who aren't. So how can, you know, all your organizations help in growing OGP?
It's almost the other way around. What you're going to get is more and more asking to join. There'll be mutually reinforcing process. And also you're going to get more and more experiences. More skills will be accumulated in the process. And we'll get, recently we delivered a big report in Brazil, for example, about integrity in government there. When some of the countries saw it in Southeast Asia, said, you know, I'd like to try something like that. And then the tribunal of accounts of that particular country had said, we don't depend on the government, we are from the parliament. We'd like to have that role strengthened also because we have the constitutional mandate. So we did that. And so you're having a multiplication of the effort and strengthening because it's easier to get the next one in line, and also the application of the experiences becomes more and more practical, more streamlined, and you also have almost like you can produce almost like a toolkit. Transparency, anti-corruption issues, public procurement issues, the delivery of better and higher quality public services, things that people will recognize as theirs, and what the things that they believe they should get in exchange for paying taxes.
Sanjay, that's an important point, actually. The beauty of multilateral organizations is that you can say there are different models that has worked here and these are why they've worked, and help and apply to all the members that go into the body. That's the point, isn't it?
That's correct. But I do want to sort of think through one aspect. So we definitely want more countries to join, and that's something which is important. But a more important, equally or if not more important imperative is to ensure that this is yielding tangible, stronger results. Otherwise, it will become a fashionable movement that countries join. And so the real test now is actually on focused implementation, on delivery of results, and that involves very specific areas. Let's take open budgets or open contracts. Take open contracts. $9.5 trillion are spent by governments in contracts, right? Yet the contracts are shrouded in secrecy and fertile grounds for corruption, collusion, and patronage. And many of them are not delivering any benefits to the citizens. So you need to have disclosure of the terms of the contracts.
That's across the board. It's not necessarily in the sorts of developing world.
It's across the board. And so you need disclosure of the terms of the contract. You need credible monitoring of both the terms of the contract and implementation of the contract. Where are we making those progress? Now, of course, as a multilateral organization, coming back to your question, we do know some countries are ahead. Georgia and Colombia have put their contracts online. Afghanistan is putting its mining contracts online, following Liberia. We have these examples which we can share. We need more of them, and we need more credible results. That's the essence.
Very important. Helen?
I think there's 3 points I'd make. Firstly, you get better public policy if you open up to the wide range of perspectives. Secondly, I think from a citizen point of view, you can take the old saying of no taxation without representation to saying no decisions made without me having an impact or input into them. And the third point is that enabling citizens to have voice and to participate is actually a long-term guarantee of stability as well, because people are rightly resentful when they see decisions made about them which they had no voice in. We put out a major human development report in March this year, which looked at what are some of the constraints on advancing human development. And one of the 4 things we identified was constraints on voice and participation. There comes a point in development, particularly with a rising middle class, where if you don't allow voice and participation, you will get big trouble. And that will limit your human development and your society's ability to move forward. Let's not forget that the original concept of human development from Amartya Sen and his colleague Al-Haq was about the concept of freedom, self-determination, expression, voice, ability to impact on the decisions impacting on you.
Hans, in terms of the work of the IDB, I mean, is this, how's it affecting the culture within the IDB itself?
Well, we have been working on issues like these for many years. We actually created a network of civil society organizations in early 2010 in all of our member countries, and we have an office in each country, as you know, where people can go and just say, look, you know, I have this issue here, and we try to facilitate dialogue. That's been part of our DNA, if you want, our mandate for a long time. But I want to go back to something Sanjay said, which is the issue of credibility and transparency and results. We've all learned about sort of the enabling factor that is technology. Everyone has access to technology. People are twittering as we speak. Yet, if you look at the relative endowment of technology in the private sector and among civil society versus governments, what you usually find is a backlog in modernization of governments. And that can create an impression that governments are not as transparent as they would like to be, because they are more challenged in actually having the resources and putting out the information and getting anything out in time, transparent into the public, especially the procurement issues and public bidding processes and so forth. A lot of governments are making a lot of progress with that, but it is not yet where it should be. And with good right, civil society is asking and requesting more. So we're very engaged in that agenda. We're trying to support governments with knowledge and with technical assistance and financial resources as well, to get up to speed and really live up to the expectations of a modern civil society.
Sanjay.
I want to pick up on Hans's point about the power of technology and what we as multilateral institutions can do to be a bridge between government and citizens in the use of technology. So we know that even in the poorest countries, there is very deep penetration of mobile phones, even in the hands of the poor. Now, if today, we as multilateral institutions, which primarily fund and work with governments, if we can integrate the voice of the poor, whether when they give feedback using SMS and mobile phones, whether teachers and textbooks are showing up in schools. So I'll give you an example. Checkmyschool.org is a website in the Philippines where parents and students can give real-time feedback using mobile phones, using social media, whether teachers and textbooks are showing up in school. Now, we finance and support governments. If in those government programs, we can invite this type of citizen feedback as to whether teachers and textbooks are showing up in school, and work with governments in ensuring response to that citizen feedback, we become the bridge between the citizens and the government, supporting both sides. In the annual meetings that we just concluded, my World Bank Group President, Jim Kim, announced that 100% of World Bank Group projects will integrate ICT-mediated citizen feedback. Now, if you just think of it, that could be such a powerful tool, because you bring onto the table of government the voice of the poor and marginalized that doesn't have a chance to be there on its own. So multilaterals being the bridge between the demand and supply side of governance, which is what the Open Government Partnership represents an enormous opportunity going forward.
Technologies have gone, Helen. Go on.
Technology certainly creates many more avenues for citizen engagement with government and vice versa. But let's not also overlook its role in democratizing. If we go back to the series of revolts that started in the Arab states or close to 3 years ago, I'm mindful of the role of ICTs in that. And I remember seeing a comment from a young Egyptian activist who said, we use Facebook to get the crowd to the demonstration, we tweet from it, and then we post the video on YouTube later. I mean, this is revolutionary. It also spawned innovations like talk to text to tweet. Not everybody has access to the internet, but people do have phones. They could then phone their message in, get it texted, get it tweeted. I mean, this was literally revolutionary in these countries. And I think as we watch some of the painful transitions, we also need to be cognizant of the role that technology could play in driving the democratization process forward.
Okay.
I accept. I mean, it's obvious that this is an enormous potential, but I think there's a lot of institutional building and there's a lot of strengthening that we have to do on the side of governments. For example, we've been working very, very hard with Tunisia. Tunisia, we believe, now meets OGP's eligibility criteria, and hopefully they will be joining early next year. Now, the Tunisian authorities just made a very big political decision that they wanted to go in this direction and that they were going to be building up in this. I mentioned the case of Brazil, or different places, different parts of the world. Myanmar is working with us now. Mexico is working on a number of issues having to do with transparency, public purchasing, etc.
Help with the eligibility criteria, though, for countries? We talked about countries wanting to sort of join, but there are eligibility criteria. Do multilaterals sort of help, or should
yes,
they?
Not only can you help meet the eligibility criteria, but it's not about being eligible to join in the sense of a conditionality.
No.
It is basically building up the institution so that you can integrate the network and then make the most out of it. And in the process, you build institutions, you build infrastructure, and of course you use technology. But my point here is technology is, in a way, an instrument. It's a tool, but you have to build the process, you have to build the institutions with very deliberate political institutions, and then also tell the people, communicate to the people what it is that you are trying to do. This I find it very critical, because, for example, the Supreme Audit institutions in the different countries, your own country, we're working with New Zealand, a very developed country, it's a very transparent country, one of the most open countries in the world. Supreme Audit institutions, why? Because the accountability, even in a very open society, is being demanded constantly in the parliament and the public opinion, etc. And if you go to very closed societies, which need opening very, very badly, so you go. So the question is here to preach by example, but also to be passing on the virus, connecting, inoculating the virus of open governments to everybody. And the quality with which you join the partnership is something which will only help the respective country make better use of the partnership. It's not that you're blocking them from joining, you're just preparing them to better take advantage of the partnership.
That's great. We're coming into the last few minutes of our discussion, so I'd like to turn to each of you to sort of sum up, if you like, some of the main thoughts and priorities that you'd like people in this room and the delegates. There's over 1,000 delegates from 61 countries. I mean, what would be your sort of final sort of thoughts about how, in the multilateral sort of world, one moves forward on open government? Hans, I'll start with you.
Yeah, for me, the key thing is trust. People have to be accountable, and they have to live up to what they say. And so in the context of the OGP, you have these concrete action plans, right? In Colombia, we just went through a process. They came up with 47 concrete actions. It is critical that each one of them be pursued, implemented, or if not implemented, revised in a very transparent, open fashion, and that people can perceive that this is actually happening, that something on the ground is changing, and people are living up, all the stakeholders that are involved are living up to those expectations. That's number one, to gain trust and to keep it. Because as Sanjay said, we don't want this to be another one of those waves that comes and goes, right? That's number one. I think the second one, which is also very important, you mentioned earlier, you asked the other gentleman in the previous panel about business. The private sector has gotten the message. The private sector wants to be more of a contributor to societal success beyond their own financial bottom line. This is happening. I just came back from a conference in Cartagena where we shared some views on the shared value concept with Michael Porter. And most of you are familiar with this concept. This is really what a lot of the leading private companies right now are interested in, but they can't do it alone. They need to work in partnership with stakeholders, their own customers, civil society, and governments. And they can do a lot to help governments get up to speed on the things where they're more challenged, like adopting modern technologies because of their budget constraints and so forth. They can do a lot of things together. And the third thing is the other branches of governments. We heard something about today, I think, about what is happening in Chile in terms of incorporating dialogue with parliament into this whole discussion. I think that is also critical. Incorporate more of an even-handed participation of the different branches of government and civil society into a more open dialogue. So I'll leave you with those 3 points.
Very good. Angel?
It's about legitimacy. It is about trust, as Hans said, but it also is about the capacity to actually implement public policies, which cannot be done anymore if you do not have widespread support. And that happens when people are informed and when they know what is being proposed. Our motto at the OECD is better policies for better lives. And I can tell you the policy side will obviously only happen to the extent that one produces this disclosure, this openness, the details. By the way, I'm not sure that if you publish the details of the public contracts on the, it will be very meaningful, because most of the people will not be able to even penetrate on the jargon and the technicalities. I think what is important is to understand how a certain process through which you buy things, through which you purchase, through which you make the competition, the auctions, the Dutch auctions, the reverse Dutch auctions. I don't know why the Dutch are so good at this, but all the auctions are called Dutch somehow. Is it all these things that are transparent actually work for their benefit, and why it is that you can multiply the bread and the fish, and that with the same amount of money you can do a lot more if you apply every bit of it and you stretch it as much as possible. This has to be a state of mind. It has to be a permanent way of doing things. It's like reform. You say you never rest. You never say, I've done all the reforms I need to do. No, you finish one and you start reviewing whether it was good or not, and you go to the next one. This is the same thing with open government. This is the way it has to be. It's not going to be, there's no alternative. You know, just move forward along with this mentality.
This question of it being just a state of mind, something as natural a thing of everybody's life is quite important, isn't it?
Yes, you're changing a culture from one of not telling people things to basically putting it out there. And I think it's important in the multilateral organisations that we walk the talk as well. At UNDP, we took a decision a couple of years ago to put all our internal audits on the internet. For our pains, we're now judged as the top multilateral in transparency and 4th in the world of the 8 organisations, which we're very proud of. I wanted to make one other point about the accession process for the partnership. You know, clubs always have eligibility criteria, whether a country is trying to join the EU or the WTO or whatever. So same with this. Those of us who engage in development can support countries to meet the benchmarks which will give entry to the club. So we make that offer too for countries which are really interested. Yes, we can work with you to meet those criteria.
Sanjay.
I think this panel is about what the role of multilateral organizations can be as new partners. For the obvious answer is that we can help the countries that make commitments implement their action plan using financial assistance or technical assistance. But I would like to submit that there are much more transformational points. First, I think because we are multilaterals, if we can help countries are doing which are game changers, that can inspire people in ways that actually catalyze and galvanize action. And that's one of the things we've been focusing on. The second, I think, much more subtle and transformational role for multilaterals is as this bridge between the demand and supply side of governance. Because we finance governments, we support governments, work with governments, if we can bring the voice of the poor into the government programs and ensure there is responsiveness to it. If we genuinely can do that, we will live the spirit of the open government partnership. And the last point, which I think is quite really transformational, is we talked about building the capacity of government. I think we need to build the capacity of civil society, which is often very weak to be able to articulate credibly the voice. There's such an imbalance in how much money we are giving to governments and how much resources are available to civil society. And if the objective of open government partnership is to ensure the voice of the poor This imbalance. So in the World Bank group, just a small thing, we used our own net income to create an entirely new instrument, which was bloody, I can tell you, getting through the board, where we used our net income to give grants to civil society organizations, to be the voice of the beneficiary inside the programs we finance. And you can imagine in a multilateral organization with 188 member countries of different political complexities, to agree to give money, our own money, to civil society organizations to hold them to account, is we can integrate the support for demand and supply side for governance and build the capacity of civil society if we have to reach those 4 billion people who live on less than $4 a day, or 1.2 billion people who live than $1.25 a day.
Very good point to end on. Thank you very much indeed. Sanjay Pradhan from the World Bank Institute, Helen Clark from the United Nations Development Programme, Angel Correa, Secretary General of the OECD, and to Hans Schulz from the IDB. That brings our first day of the OGP to an end. Thank you all very much indeed for attending. Just to say that actually there is, you're all welcome to attend a drinks reception on the 3rd floor, and there's a reserved space at the Blue Boar, which is a short walk from the conference centre. Keep tweeting. The hashtag is OGP13. And thank you all very much for coming, and see you all tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Helen. Thank you.